Did you know that a Suzuki Savage engine like this one weighs 46 kilos? Well, I do, because I actually put it on a scale. And even though that is not impossible to lift while it's sitting on the ground, it can be quite the challenge to lift when it sits inside the frame. Especially if you don't feel like damaging the frame, the engine, or your back. I've been thinking, and I have come up with a few different ideas on how to lift the engine out of the frame all by yourself without hurting anything or anyone. The main issue when removing a motorcycle engine is this top tube right here. If it wasn't for that, we would just be able to lift the engine straight up. But now we have to lift it up a little bit, move it out to the side, and then lift it up. But what if instead of moving the engine when we take it out, we move the whole bike? And by the way, if you're not sure in what direction you should pull your engine, have a look in your service manual. It probably has a section about engine removal, and it will probably say in what direction you should pull it. In my case, I want to pull it to the right. Okay, so this is the first idea I come up with. I put my motorcycle on my table lift that I then put in between these two tables. I will then take something sturdy like this 2x5 and put it through the frame. And you can use anything here, like a thick pipe, or I honestly think a 2x5 is a bit too thick. You would easily get by with a 2x3. And now you might see where I'm going with this. I would attach the engine to this 2x5 and lower the table. And in theory, the engine would stay put and become free of the frame. Then it's just a matter of moving the frame to the side. But you know what would be better than using a table lift? Using a lift like this. Because when this table lift lowers, it actually doesn't lower straight down, it moves forward at the same time. And this kind of lift doesn't. It just moves straight down. And that's what you want. And when it's time to move the frame to the side, this kind of lift would do a better job as well, because moving a table lift in that direction can be quite a hurdle. And when you get your engine hanging free, you need a way to move it to your workbench. And you can either just lift it from there, or you can use something like a height adjustable chair and just raise it up to the engine. And you could actually use this exact setup, but put the 2x5 on two car jacks instead. It might be a bit unstable, but it should work. Alright, next I think we should try to lift the engine while keeping the rest of the motorcycle in place. And my first idea was to do it using ancient technology. Like, seriously, this stuff was invented 2,000 years before Jesus was even born. Imagine 4,000 years ago, people were pulling their engines out of their hogs using this exact technique. And the technique is, of course, pulleys. And I have to warn you, this might get a little bit geeky, but I think it's important for you to know this. This can be useful not only when lifting engines, but when lifting anything. Let's imagine this being our engine, and to keep it simple, this is known as a simple machine after all, let's say that it weighs 100 kilos, or stone, or seashells, or feet, or whatever unit you like to use. 100 something. And if I were to lift this, my instinct would tell me to just attach a rope like this and lift it straight up. But that can actually be quite heavy and awkward, so to make it a little bit easier, we can introduce a pulley. I'll attach it up here, and then I pull my rope through it and attach it to the engine. Now we can use gravity to lift the engine. We are still using the same amount of force, so it still feels like I'm pulling 100 seashells, but the gravity helps a bit. But to make it even easier, we can introduce a second pulley. That pulley actually goes down here by the engine. We pull the rope through and attach it to the top. Now we actually have two ropes that lift the engines, and the force needed are divided by those two, and that means that we can take 100 and divide it by 2 and end up with just 50. So it feels like I'm pulling just 50 seashells right here. The distance I need to pull them has also doubled, but that doesn't really matter in our case. Some of you might have noticed that I'm using double pulleys, and that allows us to do something really cool. I detach the rope from up here, and I then pull it through the upper pulley and down through the lower pulley and attach it again at the top. And now we have 4 ropes lifting the engine, and that means that we can, well, you probably guessed it, divide the force by 4 and end up with just 25. That's like nothing, 25 seashells, easy peasy. If you were to scale this up to lift an actual engine, just make sure that the pulleys and the rope are rated for the weight. These small pulleys are rated for 250 kilos and the rope for 280, so we could actually use those to lift the engine. But just make sure that you attach them safely to the ceiling. And another thing you can do, instead of using double pulleys up here, you can use single pulleys and attach them to different points. That way the load is distributed across all of them. I really wanted to use this technique to lift my engine, but I don't trust my ceiling enough. So instead, I went with this beast. It's an engine hoist, and it can lift 2,000 kilos. Way overkill for our application, but if you have the space, it might actually be useful to lift other things as well. No matter how you decide to do the actual lift, you need a way to attach the engine. And I like to use these slings. One of these can actually hold 3,000 kilos. That's pretty impressive. And if you have a small single cylinder like I do, you can actually get away with just wrapping it around like this, pull it through the loop, and lift away. Of course, you can use a ratchet strap or a rope or whatever you have on hand, but these are actually pretty convenient and they're really cheap as well. But if you have a heavier or wider engine, like for example a CB750, you might actually need a contraption like this. I made this myself out of 60mm rebar. I have then bolted it to an engine leveler, and to be honest, you don't really need that, but it's nice to have and they are pretty inexpensive. I will then stick it through the frame like this and attach the sling to this bottom part. The nice thing is that this will actually spread the load across this whole bar while still being able to clear the top tube. And with this leveler, I can make sure that the whole thing is level throughout the whole procedure. But it actually looks like this sling is a bit too long. Let's move over to the workbench and I will show you how to make it shorter. It's actually quite simple. Lay your sling out like this, then make a loop right here. Take your right hand, pull it through the loop and grab the other side. Pull it through while holding the bottom part. With your right hand, grab the top part and pull. And like that, we have a shortened sling. And if you need to adjust the length, it's just a matter of pulling on this. Pretty easy. Let's try it on the bike. Alright, the shortened sling is in place together with my whole contraption, and I just need to take that last bolt out and we should have liftoff. And the bike is actually sitting on this little lift right here. It's up against the wall, but it's not resting against the wall. It's just a safety precaution. Taking it easy, just watching so I don't scratch the frame anywhere. Just pull it back a bit. And that's it, the engine is free. I really hope this gave you some ideas on how to get your engine out of that frame. And I know that I didn't cover all the possible solutions, but let's continue the discussion down in the comments. I want to hear how you have solved this. I know there are some people who lay their bike flat on the ground and kind of let the engine fall out while lifting the frame. Well, I want to hear all the crazy solutions. Thank you for watching, and I see you later. Bye!